I'm Andrea, a passionate DEI advocate and consultant on a mission. Join me in each episode as we celebrate diversity, ignite conversations, and craft workplaces and educational institutions where everyone thrives. This podcast is my commitment to making a meaningful impact on the world of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So are you ready? Let's get Diversifused. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Get Diversifused podcast. I'm your host, Andrea Horton-Mericli, founder of Diversifused DEI Consulting Services and a passionate advocate and ally. In today's episode, we will be discussing empowering immigrant talent to create inclusive workplaces through HR strategies with our guest speaker, Solveiga Jaskunas. Solveiga is an HR consultant, career coach, connector, and speaker. Her passion lies in helping immigrants thrive professionally in the United States and in working with employers into making their workplace culture more inclusive. Her consultancy focuses on HR consulting, career coaching, diversity training, speaking, and network referral services for organizations and individuals. Her recent speaking event at the Expat Women event reached participants from 60 countries. That's a lot of countries. Solveiga was recently featured in Security Magazine as one of 3 leaders with distinct LinkedIn communication styles. So Solveiga, welcome to the Get Diversifused podcast. Thank you so much for being our guest today.
Oh, thank you. It was such a nice introduction, and I was thinking that you should be a speaker.
Well, I was just reading what you gave me. So those were your words. So, why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and how you came to do what you do?
Sure. So I think we are talking about immigrants and what HR can do to support them. Yes. And probably I will tell a little about my own immigrant experience because this is what it led me. I came to the United States more than 20 years ago. And at that time, I had a degree in industrial psychology. And I thought it was going to be difficult, but I didn't expect that I will not get a single interview. My family and my friends told me that I should do something else than human resources. They told me that human resources is a very difficult field to break in when English is not your native language. And they were 100% right. But I felt passionate about the field. I already had invested 6 years of education. Yeah. So I decided to pursue it. And I think for me it was surprising that, after I took 2 classes at university in human resources, I started getting phone calls every week. And for me, it's still surprising. And in some ways, it shows the stereotypes people have about immigrants, that 2 classes will be considered more valuable than 6 years of education. But also, at the beginning, I was very excited, but my dream, instead of getting closer, was getting farther because my interviewing experience was not pleasant. And sometimes my voicemails will not get returned, or my interviews will end after the first question. And in some ways, that interviewing experience motivated me because I saw that I can see another human on the other side of the table. And now, I see that, being an immigrant was the most difficult experience, but it also helped me and shaped me who I am today, because I became more knowledgeable, because I took every opportunity to learn. I understood the challenges other people face, and, in some ways led me to speaking for others on behalf of others. And also led me to mentor others, because I saw that when I started interviewing a lot of other candidates, I saw that a lot of immigrants make the same mistakes as I do, and we do not sell their stories and tell their stories and undersell their experience. Yeah. So that's why, in some ways, I start mentoring others and now speaking also on behalf of immigrants, because I know that when English is not your native language, it can be quite intimidating speaking in the public as well.
You bring up some wonderful points. So I don't know if you know this about me, but before I did the work that I do now at the university and with my DEI consulting, I worked at local nonprofit in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. That it was the Literacy Council, and so we worked with a lot of immigrants and refugees. And I was the career counselor there, and I helped our students with their career and post-secondary goals. And I did have immigrants and refugees with all types of backgrounds and educations, and from like little to no education and work experience to masters, doctorates, and 30 plus years work experience from the country in their field. And I did have a few individuals who were HR professionals from different countries, from some countries on the African continent, some in the Middle East, some in like Belarus, and I don't know if I had any from Russia or anything, but I did find similar things that barriers to them breaking into their field of expertise in the United States, and not just for HR either. There was pretty much any profession that the policies and procedures might be different, but can be learned fairly quickly with training or reading. And so, yeah, basically I ended up just recommending taking some courses also, so they can put it on their resume, so the employers could see that they did study, they do know the US policies and procedures and rules and regulations when it comes to HR or whatever field they may have been in. And it's and sometimes that didn't even help. Sometimes it did, sometimes it didn't. I actually had one student who went back to get his MBA in human resources, even though he already had a master's and had been working in human resources, I think, for like 6 or 7 years in his country, in his country. And yeah, there's just this disconnect that employers in the United States don't realize that a lot of other countries have education that is equal or even better, than that we have here. But not that our education is bad. We have wonderful educational institutions, and I work in one, and it's just so impressive, the stuff that they do. But there is that disconnect, that there's a stereotype of that many people have, not all people, but many people have, about immigrants, that they don't know, they don't know how to do it because they're new to the country. It's like, yeah, they're new to the country. Workplace culture is different. Interviewing is different. Resumes are different. It's like, it's a whole different process that they just need a little guidance. So I love that you have the mentorship, because there are so many things that immigrants who are new to the country and trying to find their first job in their industry that they have many years experience in their country don't know. It's like, from the way the resume is formatted to interview questions, like how to answer, tell me about yourself. Employers don't care about your personal life. They want your professional life. But to someone who's never been asked a question, or has is from a country that doesn't have an interview, they just send an email or walk in and introduce themselves. They don't know how to answer that, and so it's so wonderful that you have a mentorship program for individuals who, like yourself, experience those things. So you bring even more of an impact and to these to immigrants who are looking to get their foot in the door of their whatever industry they're in, because you experienced all that, and how they may be feeling based on your own experiences, like with their accents and stuff. Because it's unfortunately true that there are many people still today, even though we're a globalized world, and there's a lot of companies that have offices all over the world, and that they're on meetings with each other, but when some people hear an accent, they shut down. They don't realize that the person's actually speaking English to them. They just hear an accent and they don't actively listen. And that's something that I find is, I wouldn't say very common, but it's more common than we'd like in westernized society, that people don't actively listen because they're thinking of like, what am I going to say next? Or, they're not fully in the conversation. And so when you're not actively listening, especially to somebody whose second or third language is English, sometimes fourth or fifth language, it's and they're speaking English to you, but with an accent, the chances of you actually understanding what they're telling you go down even more, because you're not active, you're not in the moment, you're not in that conversation physically and mentally 100%. So
yeah, and I think in some ways it's interesting that both of our experience connected us for this conversation, because we understand the challenges people face. And also seeing opportunities that they are missing and how HR professionals can help to support that.
I agree. And more needs to be done in the U.S. So with some policies and regulations that are in place, because we are losing so much talent. We were talking a little bit before we started recording today, and I work at a university. You said your husband works at a university, and so we're educating. And our universities in the United States are pretty good. So there's people that come from all over the world to study here, do research here, and a lot of them are not staying because of the need of sponsorship. A lot of them are on student visas, so they need a sponsorship, an employer to sponsor them to stay and work. And many of them want to. There's some others, and many of them don't. Many of them want to get educated and go back home and give back to the communities that they lived in and grew up in, which is wonderful. But there are many that do want to stay, would love to stay if given the opportunity, but they need an employer to sponsor them, give them a work visa, so they can stay here legally and work in the field that they were educated in the United States. And so we're losing so much talent because there's all these rules and regulations and caps on visas, and it's expensive. It's so expensive. And it's granted, there's a lot of interviews and background checks which are needed that go through these processes, but it's just the fact that they're capped and very expensive. Employers don't want to do it, and so they go with somebody who already has a work visa or a permanent resident card, or is a U.S. citizen already, that may be a little bit not as qualified. Like maybe that person was a stellar rock star candidate, but there's no way that the employer can sponsor them. With that, so this conversation is about what organizations can do to help other immigrants. But as you said, you're an immigrant from you said Lithuania, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
And you're an HR professional. How is your professional journey in HR? Can you expand a little bit more? Like, what obstacles did you face once you got in? So you already said the obstacles that you faced to even break into the HR industry.
Yeah,
so once in, did you face any obstacles, and what did you learn from that experience that you're imparting to some of your clients?
Yeah, so it took me 3 years to break in. So that was a long journey. It was a lot of interviews to break in. I'm still grateful for my first manager. And even recently, I had a conversation with him, and I asked him how come he hired me at the time that nobody else did it, because at the time my English was still not perfect at all. And he hired me to work as a sole HR practitioner. At the time, I didn't have experience. And I asked about him, and he also was an amazing mentor who mentored. But he told me really powerful words. He told me that communication for him was never about English. And communication is much more important than English. And he never regret hiring me. And I wish, that more people will consider that communication is not about only English. And especially now, like, with a lot of technology that can correct your grammar and style mistakes in seconds. It's in seconds. And some organizations still doing writing tests for everybody almost. And it doesn't, makes fear for the candidates whose English is not native, because it's hard to compete. And sometimes you question if it makes sense. When I got in, I even recently worked for one organization where I was one of a few immigrants. And before, I always worked for very international and diverse organizations where a lot of people were from other countries. And I never thought, why is so. And I've realized actually I loved that experience where I was only with a few people, because suddenly everybody's interested in me. And I was also able to go and talk with the kids about my experience growing up in the Soviet Union. And then suddenly all the kids starting doing the research about me, about my country. They start asking questions. The teacher told me that they opened the wall to the window, and that was fascinating for me. But I realized that a lot of people who hired me were immigrants or had an immigrant parents. And in some ways, I think it wouldn't be my experience like that if I was growing up in the United States. I don't think that people who will hire me would be only immigrants or having immigrant parents. And that in some ways thought-provoking question, because I've been here for 20 years, more than 20 years, and still some people are more comfortable with my language than others. It's interesting that my first speaking in a HR conference isn't at global level. I will be going speaking in a global conference in Istanbul.
In Istanbul?
Yes.
Oh, my husband's from Istanbul. I'll tell you, we can talk afterwards so I can give you some steps.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I got recommended by being in that Expat Women Summit. So it's interesting. My first two conferences are at a global level. So it's really fascinating, but I also see that it needs to be done more, and maybe sometimes people need to see the value of people from different backgrounds can bring to different fields, including in HR. Because when I worked in HR, I saw, of course, there are English is definitely is disadvantage, but it's also advantage because you have a better understanding what it takes to adjust. You can help others. You bring a different perspective. You bring a different education. You work and live in two different countries, and that can be very valuable.
Yes.
So I think there is. I think sometimes there are people who don't understand the value of people from different backgrounds can bring.
I agree with that 100%. And it's interesting that there's still people with that mentality in today's globalized world, and world where technology can connect you instantly to somebody on the other side of the globe. And it's and I'm sure, like, even teenagers and stuff, they don't even realize half the time that they're playing with, like, video games with somebody in Australia or Cameroon or Iraq, or it's like yeah, I mean, it's just to me personally, I at least in the United States, I remember, the educational K-12 educational system. When I was growing up, we didn't learn all that. I mean, we had like world history in high school and stuff, but it was very basic. There's a lot of things that are not in textbooks. There's limited exposure to other countries' writings and authors and histories. And it's only gotten worse from what I hear. Like with like Florida taking like slavery out of the textbooks. We need to expose our kids and educate our kids starting young on the beauty of diversity and the beauty of differences in cultures around the globe. And there are some, don't get me wrong, there are some schools that do that, but most of them, especially in the public school system, don't. And so we only hear what the television or movies say, you know, that we're exposed to. And I'm like, when I lived in Istanbul, even though Turkey has a wonderful curriculum about the world and everything, they had to learn about our Native Americans. They had to learn, I mean, a lot of, I mean, they had tests. I'm like, ooh, I felt ashamed because I never took geography in high school. It was an optional course, so I never took geography. And most students don't, and even the history that they were learning is like, wow, this is just so in depth and compared to what, you know, we had. And it's I just felt like there was, our K through 12 system is doing a huge disservice to our youth compared to what other countries are getting, and what their K through 12 youth are learning and absorbing. And it's not just history. They're learning about governments around the world. They're learning about other countries' governments. And it was just so nice to see the and I don't know if I know not all countries are like this, but it's just when your curriculum is diverse like that, you create more well-rounded individuals, and individuals who tend to be more curious and welcoming about people or cultures who are different from them. And it was nice to see, but I also, as I said, I felt a little embarrassed. I wouldn't say ashamed, but embarrassed because there were things that I never learned in the K through 12, in my K through 12 education, that these students in like 8th, 9th grade had learned already. And yeah, I forgot where I was going with this because I'm like just talking, but it's just when you create more well-rounded individuals starting young, the chances of them accepting others for being different from they are, who are different from they are, increase, because that well-rounded education piques their curiosity to want to ask questions, to want to learn, and from that individual, their experiences, learn more about them, and accents aside, you know. And it's that's my opinion anyway. It's not fact, it's my opinion on that point. But what are your thoughts on that?
At education, I think, it's education in the United States is different, but we have also like pluses
Yes.
we have studied a lot of things, and sometimes we have to memorize things that doesn't make sense and you forget. And you don't do a lot of presentations, and then you don't get as comfortable. I think United States education is a lot about creativity. That is also very good. Not so much about the knowledge. I think altogether, living in two different countries, you start seeing the world from a different perspectives. You learn from both, and in some ways it expands your world, because you can compare it and see, okay, this is what's good here, but this is better here, and this is how things are different. So I see, yes, my background in even psychology and human resources were very different in the United States and in here. And something I liked about here and something I like more about Lithuania.
Very good points. Very good points. And I definitely agree with you that there are goods and bads in all types of education systems around the world. But yeah, I just wish the K through 12 system here was a little bit more well-rounded, but it does have a lot of good aspects to it. I'm a product of it, so it does have a lot of good aspects to it. And yeah, but I know we're about HR and workplaces, so let's continue. Yes. Sorry about the digression, listeners.
No, it's okay.
So, in your experience, when how can HR departments create inclusive workplace cultures that celebrate diversity and promote belonging for their immigrant employees and colleagues? What do you recommend in your experience?
Sure, I think it's not only it's with people from other backgrounds, and yes, it's not only immigrants, but also international students, expatriates, because there are so much more diversity in the workplace. I also see that a lot of conversations that benefit all other employees are very important for people from international backgrounds. For example, all inclusivity, diversity discussions are really important because it's not only the employees can tell their stories and others can learn from them, but we can hear the stories of others. And I hope, the recent, change, those conversations will not stop. I also see the value for bringing the consultants from different backgrounds, because I applaud all the HR professionals who are doing a lot of amazing work and who are bringing a lot of important and needed conversations. But I also getting a feedback from a lot of immigrants saying that those conversations do not happen in the organizations, that people may be talking about diversity in the general terms, but nobody talks about the specific issues that immigrants face. They also tell me that they are not comfortable having those conversations themselves because they are worried that it will affect the employment or the promotion. And they told me that they never have a consultant who comes and who's not native speaker and who sounds like them. So I think, for organizations, it's really important to understand the need of those conversations, understand that frequently immigrants are not the ones who are raising their hands and saying what's about us, why we don't have those conversations, and to understand that value of people who also could bring that immigrant perspective. And sometimes organizations say that we're looking for topics that are more inclusive, but immigrants come from all, kinds of countries, different races, sexual orientations, disability. They cover every single EOC category. And I see that, different programs to supporting immigrants or other international employees are actually needed for everybody else because it opens conversations about what it's like feeling not enough, what maybe it's like to go through the change, what it's like to face stereotypes, what it has to have dreams that are far away. There are what it's like, to not to stop doing what you do, no matter obstacles, what it's like to change requirements of changing your own mindsets to succeed. And I think those conversations are important for everybody. Yes. So yeah, for HR professionals, I think, first it some ways needs a little to stop and really reflect what is being done and what is not being done. I think, why, consider if people's education from other experiences from other countries are really less valuable or maybe more valuable. Education, is it good to have everybody from the same educational background, or maybe it will be helpful to have somebody from different? What it's like maybe to have a consultant who can bring a different perspective to organizations. and think about different policies, starting from recruiting, then going on onboarding, going to the mentoring programs that entail checking compensation, and if people from other backgrounds are getting compensated the same or differently. Thinking about how you can empower employees to feel their full potential in the organization. So I see that those conversations actually important not only for immigrants or international employees, but basically can help everybody else.
I cannot agree more. I'm so glad that you mentioned all those things, and it's some wonderful points. And to me, it does start with having those conversations, and which can help everybody because there's so many just stereotypes and implicit biases and assumptions, which are often wrong and incorrect about others. And so having those conversations, which can sometimes be uncomfortable, is important, and they should be facilitated, of course. But it helps, as you said, colleagues learn about each other's experiences, and it's like, I never knew that. And it's like, oh wow, because they know, a person knows what they know, they're based on their experiences and what they've been exposed to, whether the exposure was incorrect or not. As I said before, with television and media, they're going to say and show you what they want to show you, and so it's these conversations really help learning and help to mitigate implicit bias that and stereotypes that individuals may have about others. So it can help everybody. But you also said that there's a lot of individuals that you work with that these conversations aren't happening, or they don't feel comfortable raising their hand. That means that they don't feel, that's not a safe space. Their workplace or organization is not creating a space of safety and belonging, and that happens, that is more that happens a lot more than we'd like to think. There's, especially in today's world in the United States, with all the federal regulation changes that started happening last year, with, and not just workplaces, but universities too, affirmative action and everything. So it's that's when spaces are not, when someone doesn't feel safe being their true authentic self, no matter who they are, where they're from, what their background is, and as we were on a panel together with intersectional identities, because we're complex creatures, we identify as more than one identity. Like, you're a woman, you're an immigrant, you're an HR professional, you're not an LGBTQ plus, but you may be, you never know. It's like, you may, and it's like, I'm a woman, you're a first generation immigrant. I'm I guess partial second generation immigrant, because my mother was from Mexico. And I'm low, I grew up low income. I grew up in a divorced household. So there's all these different intersectional identities that people who feel safe enough to be their true selves and not feel afraid or to talk, because they might be, they're afraid of any possible consequences, whether it's from administration, leadership, or their colleagues. That's something organizations need to look at, assess. As you said, they need to assess, they need to do these assessments, and often bringing someone from the outside to do those assessments gets more accurate results than doing it internally, because of that fear of repercussion if things are done internally. It's like, is it going to be associated with my email? Like, can they see where it's from? Whereas someone who comes from the outside, like a consultant like you or me, you or I, you or me, you or I think it is. We can eliminate all those identifying factors and just give the leadership the data, and HR professionals the data of the landscape of their organization, of what it looks like. Granted, nothing's 100% correct, but an outside person doing it will get more accurate results than internal. And so, and it starts from those assessments and then having those conversations, being supportive of all your employees. I mean, even your white male employees, you don't know what their background is either. Veterans, are a marginalized population. Also, they have a hard time transitioning into the workplace, and it's and a veteran who identifies as LGBTQ plus, even more so. And so it's and there are a lot of immigrants that are join the military. So if you have an immigrant, white male immigrant who identifies as LGBTQ plus, also all those intersectional identities, he may be fine showing up as a white male and maybe a veteran, but maybe not an LGBTQ plus individual in his workplace. So it's like, so you want to, organizations, as you were saying, need to create that environment of a safe space and belonging. So people don't feel like they have to hide parts of themselves to fit that mold of what normal and accepted is in that workplace and in society. And so it's like, and it all starts with those facilitated conversations and the assessments, and it's and letting everybody at the table have a voice, and feel safe enough to raise their hand and not feel like they might sound stupid or not be listened to or not or be judged or something. So all great points that you made. It's like, oh, so thank you. So guys, thank you.
I loved, your thoughts as well. It was really interesting, to listen and important. Yeah. So I like, that we having both conversation and bringing, different and also very similar perspective. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Solveiga. So are you able to share some examples of successful initiatives or programs implemented to support immigrants in the workplace, and with whether it's been in workplaces that you've worked at or workplaces your clients have been working at?
So there are, it can be many different programs. I think it's really important to have a very diverse recruiting team. So the organizations where I had a lot of people felt that they belong, we also had a diverse leadership team, we had diverse recruiting team. So then there are fewer biases, not only for international employees, but for people from all kinds of different backgrounds. But also, I would like, to give a few examples that maybe can benefit for other organizations as well.
Thank you. That would be wonderful.
So one organization I worked, we had mentoring program supporting immigrants and refugees outside of organization. And I, as an employee, I also was part of a mentoring program for almost 3 years, and after I left as well, because it's very, the people whom we are supported were looking for their first job in the United States, and this is where you face the most difficulties, and this is where you really need a mentor. Some people we have resumes of so many mistakes that they will never be invited for the interview. Some of them even didn't know how to apply for the jobs, and then just having somebody who will be able to guide through resumes, social media accounts, how to apply, but also connecting and referring for students to the people in the organizations. The program was really successful. We had some people who got hired by our organization, and then others who also got hired because of mentoring and the referrals to other organizations. So sometimes I think organizations need to think also outside of the box, how we can support immigrants or refugees who are coming and sometimes through the most difficult transition in their lives, and we cannot help others. I also cannot say how much I've learned myself from that experience, even I'm, immigrant, but when you start working with people from different countries and different sides of the world and facing even much harder challenges, it's a really empowering experience. So I think, sometimes organizations could think how we can support the communities outside of the organizations. And secondly, what I think it really helped me at the beginning for myself, and I wish more organizations would done that. When I was first, I needed to get experience in HR, and I reached out a lot of organizations asking for unpaid internship. Because I knew that maybe I will not get hired for paid. And I was lucky that when HR director got back to me and she said, yes, we don't have a paid, we have like set up program with universities. But if you are interested in unpaid, you're more than welcome to come here.
Oh,
And
wow.
yes, and I spent here like 4 months. And I've learned, so much daily to daily things, like even how to complete, how benefits are different, how to complete different paperwork. And when I got my first job in HR, it helped me because I already, had some experience in human resources in the States. And I think many organizations are looking for having internship programs for the students, at universities. But we really should expand the focus and offer internships for immigrants or refugees who need also to get that experience in the States. So I think these a few things that I think it will really help. But also, as I said, reviewing, having a consultants who come from other backgrounds, having HR professionals who come from other backgrounds, having recruiting teams from different backgrounds, having training done in organizations by people from different backgrounds. All that counts, because then suddenly people say, yeah, our voices matters. And yes, you don't need to be perfect English. You don't need to have it's okay to have an accent. You can still bring a very valuable perspective and different insights for organizations.
Yep.
So I think, sometimes organizations are looking for a perfect candidate, but we need to see what having a different candidate can help them, their teams and organizations.
Oh man, I'm just loving everything you're saying, Solveig, because it's like everything that you talked about are things that when I worked at the council, I was struggling to get the students I was working with things just like that. So I did create a mentorship program for our students at the council, but there's so many employers they're just stuck on that internship with the universities. Oh, they have to be a student. It's like, but can they even shadow? And yeah, I know there's legalities and stuff, but they can sign stuff, confidentiality stuff. And yeah, exactly. And it's there. In my experience, there was just brick wall after brick wall. Employers were so unwilling to offer unpaid internships, and that's what it is, like volunteer unpaid internships to immigrants and refugees who had experience in the industry and education just in other countries. They just needed to get exposed to the US ways.
Or pay them too, if they can afford paying, the university students, they should be able to afford paying, for people who bring backgrounds. Because yes, we can bring that diverse perspective, we can bring that knowledge, and it's really powerful to help somebody else to succeed, in their professional journeys. So
and the immigrants who are experienced and have some experience in education from the countries in that field are one step higher than the students who have just learned the stuff and have no experience. They can bring the immigrants and refugees with the experience can bring more diverse, as you had said, more diverse ideas, innovation, which is one of the many reasons to have a more diverse staff, because innovation increases, and other people and potential employees in other departments can see that, there's somebody that looks like me, that sounds like me, and increases applications for the diversity in applications for certain positions. And there's just so many things. And the importance also of when somebody, regardless of where they're from, gets a job, it's so important to pair them up with a buddy or a mentor, because every organization's different. Even if somebody has experience and stuff in the United States, every organization has their own policies and procedures that need to be followed. So having that go-to person to shadow for a couple hours or a day, and then also just to go to with questions, not to harass them, but I've never seen that happen before. But it's just so important to offer that, or to automatically do that for new employees, having that buddy or mentor in the same department, so they can sort of like a big brother, big professional brother, big professional sister, because instead of just throwing the new employee in, here you go, and because employees, regardless who they are, new employees are afraid of making a mistake, because in the United States you have that probationary time, right? In many organizations, and it's and in the state where I live in, it's an at-will state. So even after the probation time ends, it's an at-will state. You can walk in, work a full day, and then get escorted off the property. There's just so many things that the employee and the organization need to think about, and having that guidance, extra guidance, that warm hand, that inclusive guidance really helps. And to backtrack to one of our previous questions, with the inclusivity of HR, like strategies and stuff, to me, it actually should start at the job description and job application itself, because organizations need to make sure that the job description is inclusive, gender neutral, but also the application, and you had mentioned the onboarding process, which I totally agree, but the application itself should be inclusive as well. It's getting better, but a few years ago, like, I would help students with applications, and there were so many, especially the larger chain or organizations. There's so many questions on there that are so Americanized that, they're like, how do I answer this? It's like, I don't know what to put. There's nothing for me to put, it's like, but it was a required question. So it's like, let's think of what's the best possible, like, what do you think it might be closest to if I give you this scenario? It's like, well, let's put this. And it's like, and it's just, it needs to start there. Because if someone is turned off, who may be a stellar candidate, is turned off by the application, or they feel like they can't answer one or two of the required questions because there's no possible way for them to, and they don't want to lie on the application, they're not going to do the application. They're not going to complete it and submit it. So so organizations are losing potential rock star talent that way as well.
I think most people don't even like, it became so much easier to apply for the jobs, and I think a lot of organizations who use those long applications, they lose candidates altogether, because most candidates, especially if they have a jobs, they choose to apply for organizations where application is so easy with just submitting your resume or cover letter.
Yeah. And there are, like, I find the more techie the industry, the more the applications are like that, where just put your name and demographic information, and then upload your cover letter and resume, and then there's a section for any questions or comments or something like that. Those are like, and you submit it, and it goes straight to HR, because for the most part, the hiring managers and stuff are only looking at the resume and cover letters for the most part. So, because it takes a lot of time to go through an application. But anyway, what is the story behind an immigrant voice in HR?
Yeah, so I think the story is that when I start speaking, when it was my first podcast, I didn't do well. I didn't even like my own listening because I stumble over words. I got, nervous. But then suddenly people reach out to me and ask me to be a voice for them. Because in some ways, I think when I compare myself to others, we didn't compare where we compare my progress in the past. We knew how difficult it was for me to speak. They could relate to that, and where like I saw that how imperfect I was, they just wanted to see me. Where like I wanted, felt like I was uncomfortable. They told me how brave I was and how courageous I shared the stereotypes that you will not be able to share openly. And I've realized, from that point that a lot of other immigrants feel the same way, and that's why they don't share their stories on the social media. We don't go to the conferences because we always feel that somebody else is better than us. Because when we compare our language, we don't sound the same. And I've realized that I need to step out of my zone of comfort if I want to encourage others. And now I want here to provide tools and resources for organizations to help other people's journeys easier than mine. I want to challenge that negative stereotype that exists about immigrants and show that being an immigrant do not decrease your value. It actually expands your world.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I want, to be a role model for others and to show that imperfect voices are really important and needed in the world where many people feel imperfect as well. Because now it's interesting and it's empowering to see that, yes, somehow those conversations I see it's important. And yes, many HR professionals, because we don't have that immigrant perspective, we don't see the value, and sometimes it's not that we don't see importance, but maybe we don't feel comfortable leading those conversations. And I see that, yes, sometimes a message that it comes from another immigrant resonates, I think, differently, because somebody sees that you really understand what we are going through. And so I hope, to make the difference in organizations by bringing that those conversations, providing different insights, and empowering employees from different backgrounds to be their best self and not afraid to sometimes even face your own fears and your own obstacles.
Oh, man, you are to me, you are a true role model for immigrants in the United States who are trying to get into the workforce, regardless of what level, even if it's not in HR, what level, what kind of job, what different industries, because many of them, and not just immigrants, but people overall have that imposter syndrome, where we we're our own worst critic. We're our own worst enemy, our thoughts. And depending on how many intersectional identities you have, a lot of times your imposter syndrome is higher than somebody who doesn't have as many intersectional identities, because who fit the mold, that make you more further away from what you think the norm of society should be. And so I think stepping out of the comfort zone, that for anyone is brave. That's the first step, one of the first steps, and to minimizing. Now, imposter syndrome is always going to be there. Everybody has it, even CEOs. Oprah Winfrey probably, most likely has it as well. He's like, everybody has their moments of, I'm not good enough. Why are people listening to me? Why are people, I don't deserve this promotion, different things that come across, I'm not good enough. So-and-so is better. We compare ourselves, and because especially if we're different from the mold that we think society sets it as the norm. And it's so to me, it's like everything that you do and you've done is very inspiring and motivating, for others who can identify with you. And even people who I mean, even if they're not immigrants, and they're U.S. born, if they identify with you, you can be a role model for them, an inspiration, because it just takes that first step, and that first step is the scariest, because you're afraid of getting rejected, and rejection is going to happen, but you just keep showing up and going and speaking your voice, accented or not, and it's yeah. So I love the whole story that you said, what that's behind an immigrant's voice in HR, and it's just wonderful. So before we go to our key takeaways, because I want to be cognizant of time here, how can people, our listeners, if they want to connect with you, whether they want to just connect with you on LinkedIn or send you a message about questions they may have, maybe they want to be a client, or they somebody has speaking opportunities for you that they want to see if you're interested in attending as a speaker, how can these our listeners get a hold of you?
I think LinkedIn is the best way, but we could use my email, solveigaconsulting@gmail.com. And yes, I'm in the process of creating my website, but I haven't done it yet.
Okay. And that, I mean, yeah.
And it seems like, I don't know, all the opportunities came through the social media. Like even, it's interesting that a lot of places where I applied, I didn't get selected, but when suddenly I got invited to some opportunities that I never expected.
So you keep showing up. You keep showing up.
And I also somehow that people really liked a lot of speeches I've done, and then they recommended me to other places. So even the person who attended the Expat Women Summit recommended to the global conference. And now recently I spoke in one group, and then they recommended to speak in the chapter in Colorado, HR chapter. So sometimes, when I speak in one group and somebody likes it, and then they recommended me.
That's awesome. And I think you should write a book. You need to write a book about and I think that the title, The Immigrant Voice in HR, would be perfect. Write it. Write your story. You're welcome.
One day. It's a really big commitment. But yes, and it's interesting that initially when I started speaking, I thought that only immigrants will connect. But yeah, from every speech I had, people from all kind of backgrounds say, because we said, I have a disability and you don't, but your language felt like disability, or I face different stereotypes and still stereotypes, or I feel uncomfortable and afraid to speak in the public, and then seeing you speaking, and speaking is still uncomfortable, but you do it no matter what. It feels empowering. So yeah, for me, I want to help others to share their stories, empower them no matter of a background, but to bring that an immigrant perspective that everybody can learn from.
That's awesome. And that's just so inspiring. And as I said before, there's and as you've experienced, more than immigrants can identify with you and have. And so that's just wonderful. So let's go to some key takeaways, listeners. So in today's episode, we talked about the immigrant experience to try to understand it more. We explored some unique challenges and opportunities that immigrants may face in the workplace, including cultural differences, language barriers, and navigating the U.S. job market. We talked about creating inclusive workplace cultures. And we discussed some strategies for HR professionals to foster an inclusive environment that values diversity and supports the professional growth and success of their immigrant employees and colleagues. We talked about recruiting and some retention. We learned about effective recruitment practices and retention strategies in creating those inclusive environments, right? People are going to leave if they don't feel included and valued. So the strategies that can be tailored to attract and retain immigrant talent, including mentorship programs, language support, and cultural sensitivity training. We didn't touch so much on the legal considerations, so I'm going to skip that key takeaway. But we talked about building networks and support systems. We highlighted the importance of building networks and support systems for immigrant employees, both within the organization and through external resources and communities. Some possible next steps for our listeners. Conduct a diversity audit. Assess your organization's current policies, practices, and culture to identify areas for improvement in supporting immigrant employees. Implement diversity training. Provide training and education for all employees at all levels, and so including managers, HR staff, CEOs, board members, on topics such as cultural competence, unconscious bias or implicit bias, and inclusive leadership. Establish support programs, develop mentorship programs, employee resource groups, which can be called a few different things, or language classes to provide additional support and resources for immigrant employees and all employees. Foster community partnerships, collaborate with local immigrant advocacy organizations, language schools, and community centers to create networking opportunities and access to resources for immigrant employees. Stay informed, stay up to date on immigration laws and regulations, and seek legal counsel or guidance when necessary to ensure compliance and support for immigrant employees. Because if you are not an immigration lawyer, don't give immigration advice. You can talk about your experiences, but don't give immigration advice. So that's why it's very important to connect with those that do have certifications in as a legal counselor or immigration law. So do you have any other key takeaways or next steps for listeners, Solveiga, that I didn't talk about?
I think thank you first, for inviting me to my first HR podcast. I'm grateful for that, and I've learned through that experience as well. And I hope that one day maybe we'll find a project that we could support organizations together.
Oh, I'd love that.
It will be really fascinating. And I think for organizations, I will suggest just expand your vision on and see the value people from different backgrounds can bring. And to be challenge your perception on perfection and seeing how sometimes imperfect, consultants, the way you see it, or employees can bring value, so much value to your organization, to your team, and to yourself. And I hope, those conversations will happen in more organizations, because data is quite difficult. There are 50% of immigrants experience discrimination in the workplace, and that data cannot be ignored.
Yeah, I agree.
And that can help your team, your organization to compete in the global economy.
Bravo. Awesome. So listeners, I will be putting Solveiga's contact information on the last slide of today's podcast, which will be launched on June 13th. So you're listening to this now, it's June 13th or later. But I will also have her contact information in the summary of the podcast today on our YouTube channel and on our Spotify channel. If you remember, our episodes are launched every Thursday at 7 p.m. So stay tuned for our upcoming episode this Thursday. Again, this episode will launch June 13th. That's all I have for the listeners. Do you have anything else for our listeners today, Solveiga?
No, thank you all for everybody who stayed till the end, and I hope you learned something, and you'll have maybe insights that you can bring to your organization.
Awesome. And thank you so much, Solveiga, for being our guest today. I really enjoyed this conversation, and you are very knowledgeable, and I hope you may get some connections from our listeners today. You are very welcome. So listeners, with that, I will let you go. Remember, stay diversifused. I'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Want to be a guest speaker on the Get Diversifused podcast? I'm on the lookout for guests. So if you're passionate about DEI and would like to share your unique insights, experiences, or success stories, I want to hear from you. If you're a fellow podcaster who's passionate about DEI, let's swap the mic and amplify each other's voices. If you're interested in being a guest, reach out to me at Andrea@Diversifused.com and I'll send you the link to our guest interest form. Hope to hear from you soon. Remember, stay Diversifused. Now go out there and make a difference. And as always, for more strategies on building inclusive workplaces and communities, check out Diversifused. We're here to guide you on your DEI journey. Make sure to visit our website at Diversifused.com and follow us on social media for the latest happenings, blog posts, tips,